All right, let's go. Rookies to rock stars. How do we do it? Hiring in a small business is one of the most important things we can look at because if we think about it, if you've got 10 people on your team and one of those people isn't a good performer, 10% of your workforce isn't performing well. Gets a lot worse once we get down to about 5 people, 3, 4, around that. You can have 20 or 30% of your team not really optimally performing. So today what we're going to work through are the controllable factors to turn new hires into high flyers. So basically, how do we do that? How do we get them on board? Let's jump into it. So some people work, some people don't. There's a big difference between being able to interview well and work well. So we've got to work out what we're going to do about that. Now, when we get people in, there are certain things we can control and there's certain things we can't. So everyone we hire is a person first and foremost. So they've got a rich, robust life, heaps of stuff going on. Can't do much about that. What we can do a lot about though are the controllable factors we'll talk about today. So what I'm talking about here is what can we do to give this person the best chance to succeed in the role? Because in the end, we spend a lot of time at our work, like it's the majority of our waking hours for most people. We want people to enjoy their jobs, to have a sense of satisfaction, to thrive and grow within that. How do we do it? Controllable factors. So really brief overview, but I'll duck into this. There's 3 sections to this. The first is about how we actually spend the time to define the role correctly and what we want from it. The second part is about how we onboard once we've got someone. So how do we give them the best chance to get on board, to, integrate into the team, to thrive. And then the final part is about how we develop those roles, about how we bring it in as a team and how we keep it continually evolving to move forward, because nothing ever stays the same. So we're going to cover 5 key concepts, 5 key points. The first is around hiring with intent. The second is about avoiding the myth of set and forget. I'll explain all this after. Third, context is king. Concrete is a solid foundation. So the combination of those 2 things, providing context and concrete examples to really get people kicking along in the roles. The fourth is connecting the dots. So making sure that we have a networked team who work together. Think of it like gears fitting together in a machine. And then finally, how we take the team on the journey and what our role within this is as a business owner and how we make it really work. So the first thing we want to think about is hiring for output versus hiring to replace. And another way of thinking about this is, why am I actually hiring for this role? So I've oversimplified here. Is it about output? Is it about replacing? Is it about maintaining the status quo? So if someone left a role and we're replacing it, is it about, keeping the same level of performance in that role as we had before? Or is this a growth role or someone we're putting in to try and adapt to a new market, to a new business environment? It's super important that we're clear on this, because once we actually know what we're trying to get out of the role, the outputs of it, it really simplifies the whole process, because we don't have to put all that fluff in around it and all the generic stuff. Really simply, if we're getting someone in to grow sales, all we're testing for in the interview process and even the onboarding is, do I think this person can grow sales for me and fit in with the team? If we're looking at getting someone in to replace a back of house function, maybe they're an admin team member, maybe they're a warehousing person, whatever it is. Again, it's really important. So is this about fulfillment? Is it about growth? We need to be super clear on the reasons we're hiring at the moment for the role. Let's duck into some key questions we can look at for that. So powerful questions. So do I expect this role to create stability, to create order, or is it about growth in the business? Now, it might be some combination of both, and it's probably never just as simple as about pure growth. But thinking about what the primary output for this is going to make things so much easier, because then you can gear it up for that. Not only that, but if you're clear about it, it's easier for the new team member to be clear about it. Pretty simple stuff. Thinking about how long you want the person to stay in the role. So there's a big difference when you're hiring, particularly in small business, between having someone in as a long-term stable role who you just want to do the same thing over and over, and having someone in because they're at that point in their career where they might come in, they'll bring some new exciting skills to the team, but doing it with the mind that they're going to grow and look onto a new role. So thinking about, do I want someone in this role for a year and a half, or am I looking to get someone in for the rest of my business career? Again, identifying this early makes it so much easier to actually look for the right kind of candidate. You can really select for attitude, for age, for life conditions, all these things that are consistent with what you want out of the role. So important to know this early on. Being really clear, so what should this role produce? Another way of saying that is what will change or what will happen in my business if I hire the right person. So basically that's saying, how will I know if this is working? Again, if it's a sales role, what result of sales do I want to see? Is it about leads? Is it about conversion? Is it about sales at higher profit percentage? If it's about creating order, do I need to see systems implemented in the back of house? Being really clear about what you want the output of this job to be makes it so much easier in the hiring process and the onboarding process, and just generally for that team member to acquaint themselves to the team and bring their highest contribution. Finally, thinking about, is this role about profit generation or is it a support function, or is it a mix of both? Again, quite binary, but really helps you be clear. If you can answer that, much easier to hire for it. So some tips around how we do this. This first one is for the small business owners, and this is a really common scenario you get when I've done the role in the past, I've grown, I'm getting more work in, I need to get someone to replace that part of my role or that role entirely. Biggest trap here is just getting what you do exactly and dumping it onto the new role, because you've been on the journey. A, you've got a unique skill set, right? B, you're the owner, so you have a different level of investment in the business, emotionally, financially, you name it, right? And then C, and probably most importantly, you've kind of cobbled together this role from what works in the past, right? And you've done it and you've created stories around it and you do things for a reason and that works for you. But realistically, you're probably doing a lot of extra stuff than you actually need to. So if you're hiring to replace part of your role, I would actually suggest that the second point there, run a reverse pilot. A reverse pilot is when instead of adding something in and trialing that, you remove something deliberately and see what difference it makes. So working with a client at the moment, the whole reason this webinar came about, talking to them, they've had a longer term team member turn over and go to a new role, so there's a vacancy there. Now, by a little bit of design, a little bit of accident, they've ended up leaving before the new person's come on board. So we've got a gap there, and one of the owners is actually spending a bit of time working in that role. By doing that, they've been able to actually identify what the key elements of the role are. So because there's no one there now, there's no stopgap between the owner and the customer in this sense. So they've been able to identify what are the 15 to 20 key hours a week that this role actually needs to produce. So the question comes up, do we need to replace a full-time employee with a full-time employee? Maybe not. If you never leave the absence though, you don't know. Quick point there, if you need new viewpoints, look for diversity. So if you get a group of 50-year-old blokes together, 50-year-old white blokes from the country, you're probably going to get a pretty similar viewpoint and pretty similar results. If that's what you want, great. If you want a different viewpoint and to change and get new ideas though, it's probably worth getting someone else outside of your key cohort. Look at that, different viewpoints come from diverse teams. So it could be age, it could be race, it could be background, it could be any of these things. Different can be super useful. Once you're clear on what you want, look for attitude, strengths, fit, and archetypes. So what I mean by that is, once you understand what the key outputs of the role are, what it looks like as a successful role, find someone who fits into that. It's about attitude with the team. It's about the strengths that person brings. I would say it's about the fit within the team as well. Super important. Again, in small business, if you've got 5 employees and one's a dickhead, 20% of your company are dickheads. So that's not going to work. So you've got to know the fits right. The archetypes one there, what I'm talking about there is working with a client recently. He's been talking about, I have this very direct approach on one side. I need to get someone in coordination who is more motherly. So who's going to be able to, that classic role, holding the hand a little bit more, some of these things. Identify the type of person you want to get in, and it's a lot easier to try and hire and fit for that. Don't be generic. So everyone's got a pulse, but you wouldn't put that on your resume. Equally, the amount of resumes I've read before where someone gets in there and says, I'm energetic, I'm self-driven, I'm a great team player, but I can work alone well, blah, 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 blah. It's all the same stuff when you read it over and over, right, on a resume, and you glaze out. It's exactly the same, though, when you're posting your job description. So I had it come up quite recently working with a team where they wanted to hire someone in a really stable role, but it's an environment where they have to largely work on their own for long periods of time and be self-managed. So it's not a particularly social role. It's not customer facing. Yet the wording they used was quite generic, and it's, we want someone innovative and we want someone who's a great team player and all these things. But that's not what they really want for the role. They just fell into the trap of copy and pasting what they think a good job description should look like. Keep it simple, nail the points that you want in there. That's it. It doesn't have to be generic. In fact, the opposite, generic in, generic out. In summary, really quickly, this top level part of it. So when we're in the phase that we're selecting, it's about defining the role and what you want from it. And then it's about selecting the right motivation, skills, personality fit with the team for that role. You can do that via trial if you need to. Encourage it, the old hire slow, fire fast. I think that comes into it a lot here. So spending the time to really map out what you want from the role, even then screening for that and actually testing the person in the fit to see if they can produce, it's a great way to be. Any time spent at this top end is going to give you 10 time returns. Map the role out clearly and you've done half the work. Second one, the myth of set and forget. So you basically secured the candidate. Huge mistake I see is like, cool, wipe the hands of it, job done, right? There's this trap here of leaving people to their own devices just because they have experience. Or, I've hired them, they've got a PD, they know what to do. The job's not done there. It's half done, but it's not done there. So a few problems with this. One is that, if you leave people to their own devices, if the decisions are all theirs, they will create their vision of the role, not yours. Now, you might want that, and if you do, that's fine. Be deliberate about that, though. If you want the role in your vision, though, you're going to need to put in some guide rails, some frameworks, provide some context and concrete, which is the next point. But importantly, the next one there, work expands to fill time. So no one comes to work to piss around. If you give someone 5 hours of work in an 8-hour day, they'll take 8 hours to do it, or they'll create new ways to fill that gap. Like, no one feels good about sitting at a desk for 3 hours doing nothing, right? So that isn't going to happen. What happens more then is we leave these gaps for people, and it's fine when they're learning because things take longer, but if you leave 5 hours of work in an 8-hour day, people naturally will fill the space that's left with things around them that they then choose to tell themselves and everyone else is important. So they'll create complexity, they'll create new jobs, they'll create new little functions, they'll organize filing systems, you name it. No one likes sitting around in a room on their own bored, so we'll find ways to fill the time. The point here being, you fill the time with the stuff you want, or the employee will. That's the choice you have. And most owners fall over here because they either want to just move on to the next shiny thing, or they don't actually know how to frame it up and to give someone that growth, that onboarding, that opportunity to really flourish in the role. So some tips here: don't mistake experience for onboarded. Just because you've been a sales rep at company A doesn't mean you've worked for me before. So culture, I'm skipping to the third, but culture is how we do things around here, right? This takes time to understand. So you might be competent in a certain type of role, but that's not to say you know how to do it with us. So there's a big integration there that needs to happen for it to be really successful. Being clear super early on about key expectations for the role, and then verifying that those outputs are happening, or at least direction and activity is happening in that way. Talked a lot about sales rep examples already because it's a very easy one. Let's use it again. A good example of this might be you're hiring someone to try and get 10 new leads a month, right? Once you have that output, it's very easy to say, did we get 10 leads or not? Now, early on in the first month, you might not hit that target. But because you've defined that output, you can look for key activities that fit with it. So you can say, all right, you've only hit 5 leads this month. Let's pull back further. How many new introductions have you made? How many meetings have you got? Who's in the pipeline? We can look at the things before that, and then we can actually verify for activity. Whereas if you leave things quite vague and it's about get more sales, what's more sales? $1, $100, $1,000? Being specific is really important in this case, and hiring for outputs. Point down there at the bottom about test what works with that individual employee. So especially in small business, so much of the time we're replacing ourselves or someone who's been quite nimble and agile as the company's grown. Position descriptions, or more importantly, the way that things get done or the outputs get done, don't need to be carved in stone. And that's a real reality in quite small business. So yes, on one hand, it's super important to have key targets and outputs you want from the role, but at the same time, you don't need to have those carved in stone because things change. People grow into the role, and if they're the right kind of people and you've given them the right context and mapped it out for them, there are a lot of different ways they can get things done, and some will be better than yours if you've hired the right people. You need to make space for that. To sum this one up, basically what we're talking about here is spending time showing employees where and how to access key information and helping them form those key relationships. We'll come back to this one later, but super important. You don't need them to know all of the information, but you need them to know where to find the information. Good way to think about it. Third point, context is king, concrete is a solid foundation. So let's use an analogy. If you've ever done a jigsaw before, imagine how hard it would be to do a jigsaw puzzle without being able to see the box. So you've just got all these individual jigsaw pieces strewn across. You don't know what you're trying to build. Now, even if you've done a jigsaw before, even if you've done 100 jigsaws before, this would be a difficult scenario. And this is what I mean when I say don't confuse experience for onboarded, right? Just because you know how to do a jigsaw, you've done another jigsaw, doesn't mean you know how to do this one. Okay, so you might be really good at spatial intelligence, you might be good at fitting the pieces together, but if you haven't got the bigger picture, it sort of doesn't matter. Now, in an ideal scenario, if a role is really well defined, it's like giving them the box, giving them the jigsaw puzzle. The next best thing though would be, imagine if I was helping you with all these jigsaw pieces in front of you. I can't show you the box because I've only got language, but I could say to you, it's a mountain scene. 1/3 of the mountain scene is sky and 2/3 of foreground. There are 3 main mountain peaks. There are 3 cows in the bottom right of the image. There are clouds in the sky. By doing this, you could start to really build out a picture in your head of what you're trying to achieve. And that's what it's like having people on your team. Concrete, on the other hand, and you need both of these. So context, again, it's the big picture. What are we trying to create? What's our why? And then concrete tells us really how to do it. So you could almost think of like concrete done really well is like numbering the back of the pieces from 1 to 1,000 on the back of the pieces, top left to bottom right. So you turn it over and you just look at it. So examples of concrete, it's helping people understand things with clear, well-defined examples. So I'm talking checklists, I'm talking process manuals, even comparison tables where you might say, this is what good looks like, this is what great looks like. Clear, concrete, definable outputs, super helpful, but you need both. And when you have the context, which is the why, and then you've got the concrete, which is sort of more the what, the how really works itself out. Just a little example there at the bottom, and this is more about the concrete one, but there's a bit of context in there. The command to say tidy up the showroom, quite vague, versus we're having a VIP event tonight in the showroom, make it sparkle. Once you understand the why, that we've got a VIP event coming up tonight, right, showroom needs to be really presentable. We need to think about the entrance. We need to think about positioning. Will there be room for people to mingle? It spins off a whole heap of different things, as opposed to just that vague, having tidy up the showroom. What's tidy? Does that mean dusting? Does that mean organizing things? Specificity and contextuality, super important. Concept, concrete. Tips for how we do this. I really like when you're introducing a new concept. So we're talking the context here and concepts. use analogies and metaphors. It's really handy to give people a frame for what it fits into. A good way of saying that is, it's kind of like this, but it's this. One that's been done to death, everyone's heard. It's like we're the Uber of, I don't know, pizzas. When I say it's like the Uber of, that conjures up for you the idea that it's quick, it's about transparency, it's probably not on the phone with someone, so it's quite tech heavy and app based. It's really open and upfront. One I would use for my business, because I call myself a business and mindset coach, that could be a little confusing. I could say it's sort of like I'm a psychologist for your business, or I could say I'm like an optometrist for your business. I help you see your situation clearly, right? Those analogies, metaphors make it so much easier to understand what we're trying to build here. Because like everyone you hire has a rich experience of life. All you have to do is help them build it into their framework, what you're trying to do, build that bigger picture. On the concrete side of things, like I said, targets, comparison tables, checklists, super helpful. One example would be, a successful day in your role would look like this. Or you could give them, here is what a planned week looks like. You don't have to stick to it, but here's what works, I think. Another would be giving a comparison. So you could say, a good accountant files your taxes on time. A great accountant contacts you early, does your tax planning, and actually forces you to plan for the year and then files on time. Gives you a really clear binary example of like, good, great. Let them opt in. Do I want to be great? Yep, let's do it. Providing micro feedback. This is one of the biggest ones. So the best way to understand this, anyone who's ever trained a dog, you wouldn't ask it to sit and then give it a biscuit in 3 weeks, right? I like to think of micro feedback rapidly as like a little course correction, right? So you're steering the ship, you're helping your employees stay on track. So when you see something that is or isn't in line, reinforce it or correct the behavior. Super quick, super helpful. It's not like you're bad and wrong. It's just like, hey, I saw this, actually this, back to the context, back to the concrete. Makes it super easy to keep people on track early on. And the biggest problem that I see people fall into here is like, oh, I've got a performance review in 3 months, so we'll talk about it then. We've re-remembered things 100 times by then. We've written new stories. We've got new things competing for attention. Talking about something small that was wrong 3 months ago isn't going to be useful. A simple way to look at this whole concept, give everyone the why, what, how in that order. As you do this more and more, sometimes all you need to do is give the why and the what, or even just the why. So once people understand what you're trying to achieve and the why you exist and like your bigger picture, it's super easy for them to act in your interest. Really good management to me is like saying, here are the boundaries of the sandbox. Here's what we're trying to do. Go play. Boundaries are the things we don't do this, absolutely. But go play. Like good teams should be like kids at play, I reckon. Combine the two again, concept, concrete. What we're trying to do is make it really simple for people to understand the bigger picture and the smaller, call it the bricks in the building, right? So another way of saying that is like everything you're talking about should be, we're trying to do this because this, and here's who you can find out from if you're not sure what to do. Fourth point, connect the dots, network your team, right? So if you don't want to be involved in every decision, you need someone else to make the decisions. Pretty obvious, right? If you're the sole source of information, you're the sole source of information. You're making a rod for your own back. So picture a spider's web there, because we want a team to be connected like a spider's web. Really good way to think about this is for anyone from Melbourne, we've got the metro lines. You've got a couple of core hub stations in the middle, and most of the lines run in and out like a hub and spoke. So to use example here, Sunbury Station and Craigieburn Station are about 30 k's away. If you were to take the train, you would have to go all the way in along one line to Southern Cross Station, change over, and then go all the way out. On average, it takes 90 minutes. If you drive straight across, it's 35 minutes even in peak hour, right? The way to think about this as an owner, do you want to be as busy as Southern Cross Station? So on the left here, this example where we've got, information flowing all the way in to go all the way out. You're here, someone comes to ask you a question, you give the answer, and then it moves to this other person. That's fine if you want total control and you'll never have time. On the other hand, if you link up your team members so that there are buses, trams, sub routes, maybe a big city loop, they can go direct. So then information moves from Sunbury to Craigieburn. That's the way I like to think about that. It's so much better when you have, again, your job providing the context, the why, the vision, and then the team is interlinked and empowered to work together. So how do we do it? So we define roles and responsibilities really clearly, and then we make it public. So everyone knows what everyone else is trying to get done, and we know the why of it. Once people know what people are responsible for, it makes it way easier for them to interact together without needing to come through you. We continually offer up ownership once people have bought in. So once we trust them, once they're in play, offer up ownership. So if you don't want to be the decision maker, delegate that decision making. Really simply, you could put it down to, if it's going to cost less than $500, you make the decision and then just tell me about it. Really simple roles like that. It doesn't always have to be monetary, but if you insist on making all the decisions, you have to make all the decisions. That's the point. Encourage your team to actually get out there and problem solve themselves. Once they know the why and the what, they can really work out the how. So the big part of this is, like we all learn by failing or stumbling or working our way through problems. Offer up the ownership in a way that they are comfortable to take it. So don't just dump it on them. Don't make them responsible. Offer up the ownership. That's the key way to do it there. Ownership, another topic, but it has to be both given and taken. And when I say given, it's only ever offered, right? So they have to take it into themselves. If you're just trying to tell someone to do something, this is your problem now, that's not giving them ownership. That's dumping problems on them. Cool way to think about this, if your business is a vehicle, you're the driver, right? So you've got cogs in your engine, you've got machine parts working together. We want to think about them as sentient machine parts that work together, but only you are behind the steering wheel, driving, looking up with your eyes on the horizon, checking your Google Maps once in a while maybe, jamming along to tunes for inspiration. It's your job to set the direction and steer. So that's what we're trying to build here, is building a team, an engine, well-oiled machine, right? So in summary, when we're onboarding for the role, 3 key points are explaining, training, and then integrating the role with the team, right? Explaining, that's the concrete and the concept. Training, all these things we just talked about, and then that last one, integrating with the team. Cool. Well-oiled machines still require occasional maintenance, right? So we want to take this vehicle we've built on a journey. So you have a great team. Where's it going? Your job is looking up and out, right? Stuff changes. You're going to drive over different road conditions. So you've built a car for tarmac, asphalt, and now it's your job. There's a huge opportunity, but you've got to go cross country. So things change, so do roles, but because you've got a team now that's developed, that works together, that knows how it fits together, they can help you reassemble. Again, it's your job to provide the why in particular and some of the how, and then we let them worry about the what, right? So it's really as simple as just asking the right questions, entrusting capable people to make good decisions with the right information and viewpoints. So giving them clarity on what you're trying to do. A good way to think about this is good leadership to me is just getting out a little bit in front and saying, come with me. Just keep inviting them along for the journey with you. So you do this with great communication. That's a really simple one, right? We think about this as conducting the orchestra. You've got experts in their seats who are trained classical musicians. You maybe know how to do it yourself, but you don't see the orchestra conductor getting down in the pit and playing the violin, do you? They sit there and they're saying, all right, a little bit more of this. You're a little bit out of time. They're giving the feedback that the team needs. They're empowered to produce the music themselves, right? So we develop the roles within the business. We've got to acknowledge that business needs change, and so do skills as people grow. So like I said before, some roles are temporary, some are forever. We've got to continually reassess, and is everyone the right fit? Continually communicate with the team about where we're going, the why, the what, all that stuff. Tip it in, trust that team, off we go. And then leadership by getting out in front and saying, come with me. 5 key concepts there, big ones to learn. I know I've flown through this today. If you want to dip into any, really happy to talk. Phone, email, go further into it. Bring it all back together though. The whole thing's about controlling controllables. 3 key stages, spend time defining the role and what you actually want from it. Onboard well, and then develop it as you need to, as it continues to grow. If you do this, your business will not only survive, it will thrive, and you'll have a business that runs without you with a great team where you can basically choose your role in the business. And that's why so many of us got into it. Thanks for joining me. If you'd like to grab any other resources today, I've got heaps more on the link there. You can jump on the website. Any of this has piqued your interest, please do get in touch. Email and phone's the best way to do it. I'm Jake. Thank you for joining me. Onwards and upwards.